Hey everyone, this is Rene from Tippy.com. Welcome to our weekly show focused on everything iPad, from news and how-tos to app and accessory reviews. This is iPad Live. It is Sunday, December 11th, and joining me tonight is the co-host of Iterate and the Chief Information Officer of Nickelfish, Mr. Seth Clifford. How are you, Seth?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
You look a little bit harried, as though you stepped off of a car and onto a broadcast booth.
I'm a little bit harried. I had a busy day. I was running a little late, but I think I'm all comfy and set up and ensconced behind my bar now, so I'm ready to rock.
It's the bar that's important, right?
Yeah, it's the best place to podcast.
Nice. Also joining us, our very special guest, the chief ninja of 9 to 5 Mac, and the developer behind the epic air horn. It is Marc Gurman. How are you, Marc?
Doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good. Of course.
Well, before we get into what you did this week, because you were doing what you usually do, giving Apple security members nightmares and making Scott Forstall shake his tiny Vader fists, a little bit of meta to go over. We are still giving away the iOS device of your dreams. It is week 3. You have another chance to enter. Just go to tippy.com/contests, and you could win a large Apple gift certificate to buy whichever iOS device or devices as you so wish, as Georgia would put it. We are also doing the voting for our Tippy Reader's Choice Awards, because you guys are smarter than us. We want you to tell us what the best stuff is this year. We have iPad cases up, casual gaming up, lots more. It's on the front page. Hit that. iOS 5.1 Beta 2 was released, and Marc, you dug into it as only you can dig, and you came up with one of your favorite things in the universe: new wallpapers.
Yeah. For the new wallpapers, there were some jumbled up references to future iOS devices. I really didn't think that was too newsworthy at the time, but I guess it is. Basically, in the first beta, Apple had this text file, and it mentioned iPad 10.2, 10.2, the 11th generation Apple TV set-top box, which is never going to happen.
8K, right? Is that an 8K Apple TV?
Yeah. And so that was in the first beta. But also in that first beta, there was like a P list. It had all the future devices. We had iPhone 5.1, but none of the stuff that's never going to happen. And then in the second beta, they translated that P list that was genuine in beta 1 to have all those future devices that are never going to happen.
I saw this on Twitter. They basically, in the first beta, you found all those legitimate references. So in the second beta, they put in about 100 completely bogus fake ones.
Yeah.
Almost with a thing saying, "Take this, Marc, stick out tongue, smiley face."
Well, it wasn't really like pointing at me, I guess. It could just be a coincidence. I don't want to take credit for that. But yeah, hopefully that's what happened. Yeah. But you never know with Apple. Like, they were definite. I think maybe their plan was to do that all along, because those references were leaking out, even before 5.1, like in the very first betas that Apple ever seeded for iOS, a couple of years ago. So maybe they just felt with 5.1 they were going to start doing it, and then beta 2 is fully fleshed out all those, future bogus devices.
But I don't understand why they bother, because we're fairly certain there will be a new iPhone in the future, a new iPad, it's not like Apple's going to close the doors and never make anything again.
See, like, the big deal is if it said iPhone 4.3, we would know that the internals would be mostly unchanged, and maybe we would get like a new casing of some sort. But like, it being iPhone 5.1 coming from the 4S, which is 4.1, that means we're going to get a new processor, some new internal components, and probably a refresh on the outside as well. That we can know that just by the code names. Like, for example, iPhone, the first one was 1.1, and then the 3G was 1.2.
Yeah.
And
because it's got a new radio.
Right. Nothing processor-wise, nothing camera-wise was shifted. But with the 3GS, the design was exactly the same, but it got the 2.1 nomenclature because it had the faster processor, the improved camera.
It kind of tells us what Apple considers is generationally important.
Right. Like, you can say the iPhone 3G was literally a 3G first-gen iPhone.
And it reminds me once again that a lot of the stuff just didn't even get updated this year.
Yeah, what we got a new iPad in terms of hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
A revved iPhone. No Apple TV love, no iPod love, no Nano love.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2012 next year is going to be a huge year for Apple. Everything that I can think of is due for a hardware redesign, and I think everything is going to get a hardware redesign next year, besides the Air. But
Seth, does that excite you? Is that the big year you've been waiting for?
I don't think. Well, I don't think it's the big year I've been waiting for, but it's definitely exciting. I mean, just like this year was kind of a letdown, I guess, to people because, like we just kind of went over, there wasn't too much to fawn over. So next year, I mean, just tingling with anticipation already at the magical unicorns to come galloping out of Apple. Should be great.
I mean, there were probably references in there, Mark, for a new Apple television, a toaster, maybe a microwave, a small car.
yeah. I mean, if you look at it, if you look at 2009, what 2009 was about, 2009 was a pretty soft year as well. iPhone 3GS, iPod Touch, third generation didn't get a redesign, Snow Leopard. And then you look at 2010, you had an all-new iPhone, you had the iPad, the first one. Lion was introduced. And, you had a whole lot of brand new stuff, the new MacBook Air, new iLife. So, you went from 2009, which was pretty small, to 2010 was a huge year for Apple. And then 2011, it was like all software based, and we got this new redesigned iPad 2. And then, we're here in 2012 and we're going to get everything new. So you can see like a pattern starting to begin. I mean, it could be a coincidence, but that's the pattern that's already forming. Like one big year, one software year, like hardware, software,
Well, it seems almost like step, solidify. That's their usual modus operandi.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That seems about right. Yeah.
And you did manage to find, 3 or 4 brand new wallpapers hidden inside there this time?
Yeah, that's the most exciting thing that ever happened. Yeah.
Well, you were a bit giddy about it on Twitter, to be fair.
Yeah. The wallpapers, whenever you... See, the big thing about wallpapers coming up in 5.1 is the Retina display factor. Before the 4 came out with iOS 4, they put in all new wallpapers, presumably because, they made those wallpapers that were already on the phone 3 years prior for the first iPhone with the, first iPhone screen resolution. And I'm thinking, they had to make all new wallpapers because they probably didn't even think of making, 960 by 640 resolution wallpapers back then? Yeah. So it could be the same story here with the iPad. Like, they don't have all the wallpapers in the 2048 by 1536 format. So they're going to start converting them to that format or making new ones. And I think, it's a big stretch, I admit, but it could be a possible connection because it has been a connection in the past. And the wallpapers are sort of cool too.
And to be fair, there were no new wallpapers in 5.0.
Yeah, no, they weren't. I don't think so.
We were all looking for them, but yeah.
I have the grass one.
Oh, hold on, let me go full screen on you so people can see. Nice. Almost looks like they had a Mac wallpaper that was all grass for a while just before when they released the new MacBooks.
Yeah, you put these wallpapers on and it's like you have a whole new product. You save $500. No, I'm just kidding.
But Seth, we still don't have live wallpapers. Are Android cousins just so superior to us that they can afford to waste all their powerful chips and graphic renderers on wallpaper?
Yeah, I guess that must be what it is. They, the operating system doing all those things at once. Yeah, I guess it's just more specialer.
I don't, Mark, do you think Apple would ever do a live wallpaper? I mean, I can see them touting it as a tentpole feature, but I'm not really sure they do it.
I don't think so. They're so caught up in saving CPU and GPU for important stuff more than useless stuff like a live wallpaper. Like if you look at Notification Center, it's completely dead if you're not using it. Yeah. So when you pull your finger down, like the stocks and the weather widgets, they're completely stopped, but when you pull it down, they reopen.
Yeah.
So it's using nothing in the background. And I think that's the same story with the live wallpapers. You spend a lot of time on the home screen, or at least I do, and I'm sure Apple figures a lot of people spend a lot of time on that grid. But that's different than Notification Center because you're not on there for a very long time, and they could afford to have live widgets on that. But the home screen, something so pivotal for the phone, I don't think they would waste all that, all the RAM and everything that goes into making a live wallpaper. And you see Android has those wallpapers, and that could be the reason why the phones are so sluggish. Like I've been using a Skyrocket off and on. I really like it, except it does get sluggish at times, and I do have a live wallpaper on there. So I don't think Apple would risk it, or I don't think they would find it worth it. I think they could take that CPU power and put it into much more important features.
Seth, because like HTC's had they've had windshield wipers come out on the weather widget for a long time. We don't even have a weather app on the iPad still.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of little things like that kind of bug me, but yeah, I mean Mark's right. Like I never use live wallpapers on any Android devices because it just in the back of my mind, whether or not the device can handle it, I just think like these CPU cycles could be going to better use. This is silly. I shouldn't be doing this. So like I'll look at it for a little while and be like, oh, that's pretty, and then it's just back to a picture. It's one of those things that I don't think it's really important to the experience. I think it's a nice little kind of, topping on your...
No live wallpapers, have Infinity Blade. No live wallpapers, have Infinity
Yeah, there's trade-offs, right? And Apple is very much not a company that compromises on user experience. So although that's a cool thing that people like, the underlying message is that it's a trade-off. Something is going to give somewhere else. I mean, at some point, in the future when we have nuclear reactors in these devices and there's no trade-off at all.
Arc reactors, Seth from Iron Man.
Right. It's a different conversation, but no, it's not a focus for them. I don't think we'll see anything like that.
It's also distracting to the user. The iPhone and the iPad, they ushered in this full screen app thing like we're seeing in line now. And having a live wallpaper in the back of your grid of icons is like sort of distracting to the user and so unnecessary. So there's another reason why Apple won't do it.
What I've got to call a break exclusive, randomly accurate rumor site Digitimes decided to weigh in and say that we will probably be getting an iPad 3 this March or April. I don't know how they decided to go out on a limb like that, stake their reputation on a claim like that, but
that's bold.
It is bold. I mean, you got to give them credit. The only thing I'm wondering is, and we've been talking about this for a while, with Apple moving, maybe they're going to keep it there, maybe they're not, but with Apple having the iPhone released in the fall last year, Mark, I think there's any chance they'll leave it in the fall and give iPad 3 the WWDC spot, and that might take some pressure off of people saying, I'm not buying an iPad for Christmas. There's going to be a new one in 2 months anyway.
In terms of the iPad not coming in that March-April timeframe, I think that's very unlikely given the past reports and given how much Apple is really speeding up the iPad, like really ushering in the tablet. People are coming out with all their tablets and then they just want to quickly crush them like they did with the 2, came out right in March, like less than a year than the original iPad. I don't see the iPad coming out after March or April. Maybe it'll even come out in February or something. But, Wall Street Journal said they already have components flowing for early 2012 launch. If they did it at WWDC, they would have to be, I don't know, maybe a last-minute production Retina display issue, which seems very, very likely at this point. Given your report, did your report say like they delayed it from last year because of production issues?
They can't get enough panels.
Yeah, so if that already happened once, I don't see why it won't happen again. But not going to be WWDC. I think it would be earlier in the year. In terms of the iPhone in the fall, that maybe they would stick to that in order to stick to the contract thing with the carriers, or like having a new one every year.
Yeah.
I'm sure they wanted to get it out in June. Like they were already seeding these things to developers, like A5 iPhones to developers in ready in February, in March, April of 2011, so earlier this year.
That's when you coined the 4S name, right?
Yeah. Planning for a June launch, but something moved them past June. I don't know if it was Siri. I don't know if it was the A5 heating up. I don't know what it was, or it could have just been iOS 5 in general. That might be the case. But yeah, that's what pushed it to October, and I think the plan was June all along. Will they go back to June for the new iPhone? I don't know. Hopefully, because the 4 design's already getting boring. But we'll just have to see. But I don't know. What is Apple going to do next fall if they don't do an iPhone? What's going to happen to the iPod? I think those are bigger questions. I think that's really what Tim Cook and the executive team is really going to have to focus on what happens for the iPod more than
their big
iPhone.
fall. Yeah, their big fall explosion.
Well, maybe the fall event becomes the TV event.
I think next year's a little early for the TV. Like, did you see the Wall Street Journal report like an hour ago? That was massive. Yeah. It doesn't sound like a next year thing.
Sounds like one of those things where
they could always deliver a new puck. While we're waiting.
Especially if they're trying to get out a new set-top box early next year. I don't think they're going to do the new $99 Apple TV beginning of the year, and then the big guy in the end of the year. So I think, like New York Times said, it's going to be a 2013 thing.
Is that strange? Let me just tangent for a second. Is that strange that we didn't see the Apple TV 3 with the A5 this year?
I don't know. I don't know how strange it is. It's definitely coming. Like, there's the 3.1 in the SDK in the OS for a few months now, and we already found that it's going to have Bluetooth 4.0.
Yeah.
So it's coming, but I don't understand why it didn't come this year. It might have been because the big thing with the A5 Apple TV, it's going to be the 1080p content streaming. So I think the holdback here was negotiating with the studios, etc. I don't think it was hardware wise, because what is the hardware team focusing on if they only came out with an iPad 2
devices?
Like, they're prepping for a big 2012, but I don't think putting a new chip in the same design would disrupt that.
No, it seems like that was a product ready a while ago, and they just haven't pulled the trigger on it. And it's odd because they would get a lot of Christmas sales, but maybe they think, there's no need. There's very little competition. The content is still 720p, and there's no pressing need to go A5.
Yeah, the 4S was done in 2010. It was done. The software was the issue with the 4S delay. But, it's a good question what happened to the Apple TV 3. Definitely, I would think it's content.
Tim Cook has one. Damn it, just not the rest of us.
He had the iPad, he said 6 months before the January announcement? Yeah. That's all. Yeah. And if you look in, like, the SDK, they had iPad 0.1 and iPad 1.1, which is really interesting. So I bet 0.1 is what he had. So I wonder what the differences were.
Seth, do you think Apple, since they already have so few products, it's dangerous for them to even put out less in a year? Or do you think that they're so successful at this point that they have time to, stage their products carefully?
I think that it's only a problem for Apple link baiting analysts. I don't think it's a problem for Apple. I think Apple has their own plans, their own schedule. If they're slipping from their own schedule, we'll never know. So it's not really a problem for us. I mean, it's one of those things where the longer you wait without a new product, the less inclined you are to either buy something or recommend it to somebody. Like, if somebody came to me now, and people have been coming to me and saying, like, hey, I'm thinking of getting a Kindle Fire or an iPad right now. And I'm like, can you wait a couple months? Because you'll probably be better off. If somebody said, I want to buy an Apple TV, I'd be like, all right, it's $100. You're probably not going to see that for a while. That's fine. I don't think it's a problem that they're not shipping new hardware. I think that's probably something that, like I said, analysts will look at and be like, oh, look at all this new hardware from everybody else. Apple's dropping the ball, and it's meaningless. It's perception is reality to people, so that's fine if that's what you want to think, but I don't think it's really dangerous to them.
And the iPad 3 is interesting, too, because despite, fair enough, Apple has said no one wants to watch video on an iPod. They have said they're not going to make a phone, but they fairly clearly said that they didn't have very much interest in a 7-inch iPad. And yet we get nothing but rumors of, between 7 and 8-inch iPads. And this one said that it's because Apple is struggling. They're actually worried about competing with the Kindle Fire. And that struck me immediately as odd. Mark, do you think there's actually any real competitive pressure from the Kindle Fire? I mean, to me, it seemed almost like Apple has to make a netbook sort of analyst angst.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, the 7-inch tablets are pieces of junk. Like Steve said, I've been using a Kindle Fire. The software is sort of nice. Like, the convenience of the size is nice. But I think for someone to go out and say that Apple is facing competition and that is why they're going to make a smaller tablet is a really dumb thing. I don't think Apple has, what's the market share? Is it 90% still?
It depends if you count shipped versus sold. Like, if competitors shipped and Apple sold, I think they have 70%. But if it's sold, I think it's between 80 and 90.
all right, whatever it is, it's still a dumb reason to say Apple's making a 7-inch tablet because of competition. Like the Kindle Fire, how much is it selling? I mean, it's coming nowhere close to the iPad, and I think Apple is going to focus on that 10-inch size. And then if you're going, and Apple's not going to decrease from 10 to 7. They're going to, if they do one, they're going to do 10 and 7, and that's horrible fragmentation, something they're 100% against. So I think they're going to take the current size, and they're just going to run with it for many generations to come.
Yeah, I think if there was a 7-inch tablet that was really selling like gangbusters, I think they might look at it and be like, wow, I guess maybe people do actually want that size. But there's not one single device that's even coming close to what 10-inch is doing for them. So I don't think they're even going to entertain it right now.
It's a very different strategy. I mean, Amazon went with 7, RIM, and you say what you want about the playbook, but RIM stuck their line in the sand. They made a 7-inch tablet. HP was going to do a 7-inch and a 10-inch. Samsung makes every single tablet at half-inch intervals from 1 to 100, I think, at this point now. But and this is a thing that I was talking about because we did the Crackberry podcast on Friday, and I was on for a little bit. To me, there still isn't a tablet market. There is a market for people who are intimidated by computers, and the iPad seems like a friendly alternative. But it's not like these people want a tablet and have been buying Windows tablets for years and are now buying iPads. The other tablets that are being sold are mostly, unless it's like the Amazon Nook kind, they're much more intimidating tablets. They have much more complicated desktop-like OSs and multitaskers. And I'm not sure that's what people want. So I don't know if it's the size or the OSs that are stopping people from going to 7-inch tablets. I know my mom uses an iPad because it's press a button, home screen, press a button, launch an app, press a button. A Mac is way too complicated. An iPad is perfect. If I give her like Honeycomb, she's lost again.
Dude, I'm kind of lost with Honeycomb. It's not easy.
That's the thing. I think that the nerdy market for tablets isn't that big. People are realizing it's not that big, and the mainstream market is huge. And Apple and arguably maybe Palm were the only ones making OSs that were kind of catering to a non-techie audience. I'm not sure yet. Maybe Windows 8 will change that.
Yeah.
How do you like the Kindle Fire, Mark? Did it annoy you the way it annoyed a lot of early buyers, or were you happy with it?
Well, I don't actually own one. A couple of my friends have it. Whenever I go over their houses, I always play with it. I want to see what it's like. But I've played with it a lot, and it's pretty buggy. It's pretty slow. And the 7-inch size is more content consumption. You can't really create anything on that. Like versus on the iPad, you have iMovie, GarageBand. I guess GarageBand isn't fair to say because you have that on the iPhone too. But I actually think on the iPhone it's pretty novelty. I don't know why they did that. But yeah. You can really make good use out of the 10-inch size, but the 7-inch size is pretty useless for doing anything besides watching movies. Games are much better on the iPad 10-inch screen because you can put the controls where you want, and it's less handheld, pocket sized than a 7-inch tablet. Like the Kindle Fire, you can put in your back pocket.
Yeah,
the iPad you can't. I mean, it's like a solid device. It's not a toy. It's like it's a computer that's easy to use.
Yeah.
7-inch tablet is not. 7-inch tablet
it's like
is
a big phone.
It's a big phone. Yeah.
I think that's when Steve Jobs was talking about the tablet sizes, he kind of made the joke about shaving your fingers, but one of the more salient points was that the 10 inches allowed a different class of software. It wasn't just big phone software. It was a whole different kind of software. And I think that's been proven out because while we have seen Honeycomb on the bigger tablets, people always say they can scale. I mean, WebOS said they can scale, Android says they can scale, but they can't. I mean, it's not realistic to think a high quality app can auto-magically scale if you care about interface and design. Like we've spoken to people on Iterate about that, Seth. You have to specifically target the best experience to the actual hardware you're making. And I think that's why Apple's been successful with drawing that 10-inch versus 3.5-inch size.
Yeah, well, nothing automagically scales. Servers don't automatically scale, no matter what people like to think. There's a lot of thinking that has to go into scaling anything at any level. So, by choosing to focus on one size, what Apple's done is it's given developers a clear target of what they actually need to build against, and I think that the iOS development community is by and large pretty comfortable with that. Just having experience on other platforms, it's at some level, it's like just not even understandable when you try to think about all the different permutations of devices you have to try to account for. So I think that's definitely something that iOS has going for it that the other platforms don't, is that it's a much clearer path for developers moving forward. And I think the only way that they can move with the iPad is to just double up that screen like they did on the phone. Otherwise, people are going to start losing their minds, and I don't think they even want to cause any kind of rifts like that in the community right now.
No, I think it'll be a double-sized Retina display, Mark. Isn't the 2x graphics are pretty much there?
There really aren't any 2x graphics. Are you asking about like the SDK and whatever?
No, I'm just saying that I think that Apple set that expectation for developers.
Oh yeah. It's 2x or nothing. There's no super high resolution. There's no super duper high resolution. It's Retina. It's not Retina. It's double.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. It would be horrible for the developers, and it would go. It's basically making a 7-inch iPad.
Yeah.
Making a non. Yeah. You know what I mean? You get the analogy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just another segue, and I didn't include this in the show notes, so I apologize, but I saw it during the day, and because Mark was on, we have to talk about it. Sadly, very sadly, the Juju tab is no more. Fusion Garage has disappeared. We believe that someone from either the unit or Burn Notice or someone went in, collected those boys up, and made them disappear. I know, like myself, Mark, you wasted a couple hours of your life watching that press conference for the Grid 10, the Grid operating system. Do you have any parting words for our friends over at Juju?
I think it was pretty brave to go pull that Tabco stunt. You know, what is Tabco over WWDC? I hope we don't see that the next WWDC under a new name. But, you know, they really hyped it up, and this is a big letdown. You know, I mean, the tablet sucks. Like, the Grid OS, it's so, like, from what I've seen in reviews, whatever, it's so sluggish. I don't understand why even any one person would want to buy one. So I guess it's really unsurprising that they shut down. You know, there's a point where your costs are going to get too much to handle, and we haven't heard about them for a while, and they're, you know, I wonder how long their website has been offline until someone noticed.
Until someone actually, we got a hit this month.
Could have been down for a month.
I'm just going to be sad I'll never get to see a Juju phone in the wild.
The Grid 4?
Yeah.
Was it ever released?
I don't even know if it was prototyped. Seth, do you have any final words for our friends at Juju?
You can just insert a fart noise here.
There's actually a couple apps for that. That's very all right, so this was actually really odd. Apple released iTunes Match and iTunes TV shows in the cloud, but they didn't work. So Apple very quickly unlaunched them, and then a couple days later launched them again with them actually working. And Apple launches are usually fairly well coordinated. They are very well staged. I mean, they had a press release saying that Brazil was getting iTunes Match, but Canada, the UK, a bunch of really large markets had this very strange launch. Mark, I can't remember an Apple launch ever going this way before. Maybe Mobile Me, arguably, but even that had some press.
But look at Mobile Me. It was like a planned launch. Everyone knew it was coming. Hey, Mobile Me is going live today. This iTunes thing, the only reason people knew about it is because people were talking about it and people were reporting it. It's one thing if it happens that way, but if Apple puts out a press release and says, "Hey, Canada, Australia, etc., you guys are getting iCloud TV today," and then it goes wrong, that's one thing. But that's not what happened. So I thought maybe they launched it a little prematurely. They were trying to do it in stages. Since the Mobile Me thing. I remember in Steve Jobs' email to the employees, he was like, we should have launched this at this time and this at this time. So maybe they were trying to go gradually. And then when people caught on that it was happening and then everyone is rushing into it at once, they had to pull it and, reevaluate the servers, etc. So I don't think it was a big deal.
Seth, do you think it's possible that someone got into the JD bottles a little bit early and leant down on the wrong lever at the wrong time?
Hey, man, don't blame alcohol for these kinds of decisions. People make bad decisions all by themselves.
Yeah. Well, but it's so, I mean, the actual menu showed up on my Apple TV for TV shows. It gave me an error when I hit it, and then the menu disappeared. Then a couple days later, it came back, and it worked. iTunes Match showed up. It didn't work. It just gave me an error. I had to hit it. It disappeared. A couple days later, it came back, and it worked. It was perplexing.
Rene, just stop living in Canada.
Shut up and use your Apple stuff. Well, it's not just Canada, like Mike said. It was the UK, it was Australia. Are you saying just stop living anywhere that doesn't have 50 stars in its flag?
No, I was just taking a shot because I saw one.
Okay, taken. I'm gonna stick with the theory that it was a very odd launch.
Yeah, definitely stumbly.
But it's odd that they went so far so fast. I thought it would take them a lot longer to negotiate licensing deals with the studios because it's usually such a painful process. If you ever talk to any of the big, like the Slackers or the Pandoras or any of the companies that aren't Apple and will actually talk to you, it sounds like getting licensing in countries like Canada and the UK is just painful. And I'm surprised Apple, even though they stumbled with the launch, managed to launch in so many countries so quickly.
But there you go. You said it. It is Apple. You know. Yeah. Apple is Apple. Apple executive walks in there. People are going to, they're going to listen. They're going to, they're going to deal with whatever. Unless you're Warner Brothers, you're going to deal with any terms they present you. So.
Or Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, I don't know. The Daily.
Yeah, no,
it's in my dock. Yeah.
It's still in your dock.
No.
Oh, okay, nice. I keep forgetting about that app. This is also interesting. There was an article from Reuters. Is it Reuters or Reuters? I never remember.
Reuters, right?
Reuters. Apple A5 chip production is happening in the great state of Texas. And at the same time, there's an article from Israel that Apple, like Intel before them, are opening up an R&D, the first external R&D facility in Israel. And for history buffs, I believe the Intel Core 2 Duo came out of Intel's Skunkworks in Israel when the Pentium line was about to, fall behind AMD. They worked that little miracle. So it's definitely an excellent area. But Seth, what does it say that Apple is repatriating the production while expatriating the design, or at least some of the thinking behind the design?
Oh man, I don't know. I have no idea what that actually means. It probably means that they've done copious amounts of research into what's best for the business, and for right now, that's the best decision, because I couldn't even begin to fathom why they would make choices like that. I mean, I guess bringing chip production domestically might help in terms of overseeing production, as opposed to having to be halfway around the world and communicating with people when there are slowdowns or problems or things like that. I think probably having it closer to home is a benefit in that they can get down there very quickly if they need to and talk to people. In terms of moving design out, it could just be a matter of the talent that they want to use is there, and it doesn't make sense to bring them here. So it could just be a matter of, accommodating the brains that they want to have working with them in a way that works for everybody.
And it's not all design. It's just one new Skunkworks lab, but it's still a Samsung factory in Texas, Mark, and it's still going to be an Apple. I guess people are saying PA Semi or Intricity, but I don't think we really know who's working there. But is this a sign of Apple trying to get more competitive, maybe?
Well, I think putting aside the Texas factor, I think the interesting part here is that this is a brand new production line. I mean, this is like it's a breaking thing. They started the Texas factory not too long ago, and I think that they're investing in a dedicated place to manufacture the A5 could say something about Apple's plans. Will there be an A6 next year? How many more A5 devices are they planning? Why aren't they already producing the A6s? Do you understand my thinking?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the dual core processor. I mean, it seems like a milestone to me. Like you're gonna have an A6 iPad, you could have that, but maybe the next iPhone won't go quad core, whatever the A6 is. Maybe it will stick to the A5. Maybe the Apple TV won't be A6. Maybe that will be A5. So they're not going to make a factory for a product or for a chip that's only going to be in production for a few more months. Like it's this whole dedicated center to pump out A5s.
Could they, like we always wondered this because they do it with the iPhone, could they start leaving last year's iPad around as the discount cheaper product to maybe compete more with Kindles and Nooks?
I don't think so. The iPad doesn't seem like the kind of product that you can do that to. That $499 price point, it's hard to go below that. It's hard, like, I don't know, maybe if they do a cheaper iPad, it will compromise the more expensive one, which would stay maybe at $499. Or, if you think about it, maybe the Retina iPad, it costs too much to keep that $499 price point. So maybe you can say we have the $499 iPad 2, but the more expensive models have Retina displays, sort of like what they did with the iPod Touch 3rd gen, have like, that type of thing. And about Israel, that's a pretty cool topic. I'm from there originally, and it's always been this high-tech sector of the world. It's been known, innovation in terms of the cell phone, innovation in terms of instant messaging, and I think Apple has understood that Israel is really prime for this technology stuff. It's really world-renowned for technology. As you said, Intel has their R&D center there. So I don't know, maybe they're hoping that Apple will be the maker of the next big thing to come out of Israel, and I think it's a good move going global with their designs.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're seeing the Android tablets already go quad-core, and I think they're going to be using the A15 from Cortex at some point. Right now they're using the Cortex A9, and the A15 I think is a successor. But it's funny how even Apple with all their designs are kind of slaves to the timing of the next chipset. Like the Macs are always waiting on the next set of Intel chips, and the iPads and iPhones and iPods are waiting on the next reference designs from ARM. But Apple's, as much as they do wait for those chips, it seems like that's not always their focus. It's a more holistic kind of a device look. And Seth, we've talked about Android and the way that it runs, and the more power, the better. But Apple, maybe Mark's right. Maybe they won't care so much about an A6 immediately. Maybe there doesn't have to be a new A chip every year.
No, I think that's definitely something to consider. And as he was saying it, I've started to think about it more and more. And it does make a lot of sense because I think at this point, when we look at stuff like the iPhone 4S, it's like, how much faster could we possibly anticipate it working? And I think Apple's focus now, as a point of differentiation, could definitely be in optimizing what they've accomplished thus far, both in terms of battery and other processes and things like that within the devices. So on one hand, I definitely think that there's a possibility that the chip will remain the same, and they'll be looking at other ways to change the internal architecture of the devices to run better and perform better to the end user. So while people will gripe and say it's the same chip as last year, the overall tweaks made to the device are going to provide a higher level of performance. So I think there's definitely something there. The other thing is if they introduce new devices, like an Apple TV, just, for speculation for no other reason than that, that kind of device really probably doesn't need the kind of horsepower that an A6 would deliver. So I think if they're going to build a factory to make a dedicated single type of chip, there's probably a long play in it that they've got ideas that don't revolve around, basically kind of what we saw in the 90s where it was like a game of one-upsmanship over microchips, and then it's going to be different. And obviously battery is the next big thing to conquer because that is the thing that continues to hamper the entire industry.
Superconductors. We're making superconductors in Israel. We've cracked it.
Yeah, there's no Moore's law for batteries. We need to figure it out.
Well, here's another question. I mean, if they do go Retina display for the iPad 3 and they start pushing, 2048 by 1536 pixels,
I think so.
Does that need more horsepower? Because I spoke about this last week, but I went and played with the Galaxy Nexus and the Galaxy Tab, not the 10, the 8, the Galaxy Tab 8. And I know I have to apologize beforehand, but these things matter to me. Since I've been using an iPhone since 2007, an iPad since 2010, part of the illusion of the device to me is that it tracks your finger perfectly. You touch something and it moves perfectly. And Android doesn't do that. And they throw a lot of horsepower, and the better it gets. iOS has never historically needed that much horsepower because of the priority of the UI rendering. But a Retina display iPad is a lot of pixels to move around. And I think Apple will do almost everything they need to keep that UI fluid, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, as Seth was saying, I don't think the phone can go much faster. But like I said before, computers are always getting faster and faster. Apple's not going to stand still on computer speed. And with the iPad being more computer than phone, I think maybe they go A6 on the iPad 3, but go A5 on the Apple TV, and then a new iPod Touch and a new iPhone 6. I'm calling it the 6 because it's the 6. But yeah, I think you're right about the Retina needing a faster processor. But is it quad core or nothing, or is it faster clock speed or nothing?
Yeah. Because they changed the architecture last year, they have to change the architecture again this year, or just increase the component speed, or increase the RAM. I mean, there's a lot of options.
I mean, what stops them from doing like an A5 Plus or something?
Yeah.
Do you guys know off the top of your head what the difference is in sales roughly between iPhone and iPad?
iPhone, I believe, I'm not going to say it makes iPad into a small error, but
but it's significant. Yeah,
the iPhone is by far it sells stupefyingly well. I'm trying to wrap my head around the numbers that people are predicting for this quarter. Maybe Mark remembers it, but like 30 million iPhones. I remember a couple years ago we were wondering if Apple would ever sell 10 million iPhones in a quarter.
Right.
They did 17 last quarter, and that was looked on as horrible.
All right, so let's just call it exponential over the iPad sales. The iPad's a really popular product. So if they were to keep the same chip in the phone and continue to use it, that would make a lot of sense given that the numbers are so skewed in that device's favor to make it worthwhile if they were going to look for other ways to optimize the devices. And then if they were to actually have to bump up the chips in the iPad, then that could go back to the same chip plants where, stuff is happening right now. So that seems to make more and more sense the more I think about it. And
if they do dump the iPhone, I mean, if they do get an iPhone, when they get the next generation iPhone, presumably they will leave the 4S as the discount model. This time, maybe the 4, so they're not going to have to be making A5 chips for a while still anyway.
Can you imagine the 4S as the discount
cheapy phone? It's a budget option.
Solid.
The iPad 2 will be obsoleted soon, Seth. I mean, it's a crazy time in technology.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because we don't get I keep saying this, but Phil at Android Central probably reviews 3 or more phones by breakfast than I get to review in the year. And it kind of makes you not realize the pace of the speed that this whole market is going in. Yeah, wait a minute. They didn't open source Juju OS the way they did WebOS. I'm just realizing that. That'd be interesting.
There was one guy who was really mad.
Do you think there's anything in an open source WebOS, Mark? Do you think that Apple or Google or any major player, a Facebook or an Amazon, could take interest?
Facebook, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, WebOS was a social OS at heart. Remember when they debuted it, in terms of what did they call it, synergy, how integrated it is with Facebook? Yep. I think Facebook should, and I think WebOS is the perfect platform for them to just take it and run with it.
One thing that I think stops Facebook from doing that is Eric Tsang, the guy who used to run Android, is in charge of mobile for Facebook, and he's probably really comfortable with Android, which is kind of sad.
That too. I mean, I'm just hoping WebOS, I always thought it was a really nice operating system, so I guess I'm biased in that. I'm hoping someone does something nice with it.
Me too. I mean,
the hardware sucks, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm watching the show on a touchpad right now.
That's nice, Seth. You're the one.
No.
I knew that hit from the website came somewhere. No, I mean, it's a fantastic OS. It's just that, like you said, it was never great hardware, and HP lacked the testicular fortitude to do what they needed to do to make it a good good product. I keep thinking maybe a crazy SOB like Jeff Bezos will step in and do something with it, but you never know.
Yeah, they did a great job on the Fire operating system. I mean, it's buggy and slow, but in terms of the customization on top of Android, it's really nice that they were able to do that.
If your job is to sell as much Amazon content as possible, then you develop the perfect UI to do that with. It is pure content. They give you, here's your content, here's how you get more of it, here's more content, watch it, get more of it. I think that's when you have like a really high level of focus in your development that you get good results like that. Apps, interesting apps. We got a slew of Microsoft apps. We got everything from Connectimals to OneNote, SkyDrive, and we spoke about this a little bit on Wednesday. And my gut feeling was that Microsoft wants to make sure that they're on iOS because there's a huge user base, and if they don't want. Google's always made a ton of apps for iOS. Microsoft is now getting in that game. Mark, do you think that this is a strategy from Microsoft or more of a reaction from Microsoft?
Getting into the iPad apps?
Yeah.
I think it's necessary. Microsoft has always been a software company, right? So I think jumping on top of a platform like the iPad is necessary. They notice tablets are going to be the future, and they don't have theirs ready yet. So I think they need something in the interim. They don't want to just cover their market. They want to cover everyone's market. Just like Office for Mac. You have Office for Windows, but then you got Office for Mac, even though they have their own operating system to run it on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it just makes sense. It's just the natural way of life and innovation that they're going to make their tablet OS, and they're going to put their tablet apps on that. But they'll offer the tablet apps on other platforms as well. And what better platform to do it on the one with 70% of the market?
Because there were absolutely no Android apps from Microsoft released.
Yeah.
Which is
Android,
interesting.
It's easier to develop. I mean, who wants to mess with Android?
Don't tell Eric Schmidt that. He'll be heartbroken. He said that it's going to become the dominant development platform, the priority development platform in, 6 months, was it?
Something like that, right? Pretty aggressive.
But not for Microsoft. No, it's really interesting, Seth, because you got to think Windows doesn't have a horse in the tablet race yet, and they're supposedly going to have one when Windows 8 and the Metro layer ship, and we'll start seeing Windows slates. And you got to figure the guys, I was going to say Andy Lee's, but he's not there as of last week. Whoever is running Windows 8 tablet efforts now is kind of a little bit pissed because Office is their big advantage. OneNote, all these apps could have been something that made people consider Windows over iOS.
Yeah, but I said this the other night, and I still really believe this. Microsoft, through all of their follies, is not a stupid company. They understand that they're not going to get everybody away from iOS. So I think they're definitely hedging their bets in the best way possible. And I think it's a very smart thing to do to get all of that brand exposure everywhere they possibly can, because ultimately, if people fall in love with great Microsoft products on iOS, when it comes time to upgrade a phone, they may look and say, you know what, I'm using these 4 things already. I bet they work better on a Windows phone. I'm not saying everyone's going to do this, but I'm saying it at least creates doubt in some people's minds. Some people, okay? And more than anything else, they're a software company. We keep referring to Microsoft.
But they want to be a platform company. They've been spending years, decades, and billions trying to become a platform company.
That's okay, but
that's nice.
They're not hardware competitive. People kind of globally refer to Microsoft as like a company that makes this stuff and hardware gets lumped in with it, like the Microsoft tablet we keep kind of nebulously referring to. But realistically, Google is their competition. And we've kind of touched on this too, that Google is the one that over the past decade went head on at Microsoft, stopping short of an actual Windows competitor. I mean, obviously, Chrome OS is not a Windows competitor. We can all agree on that. But
it's an Internet Explorer box competitor.
They systematically chipped away at all the things Microsoft had dominance in. And I think that shook a lot of people up. So I think rather than Microsoft resting on their laurels and saying, we'll get them back, don't worry, everybody, I think somebody over there was like, hey, guys, why don't we just put this stuff everywhere and see what happens? And I think it's a good plan.
Why, oh why, is Nintendo not doing the same thing?
Oh, man, that's a whole other discussion.
I want my Mario. I want my Mario now. Now.
I think that is more a cultural choice. I think there's a lot of kind of old school pride at that company that they are not going to make that choice.
Mark, what do you think about all these companies? I mean, Apple has been Steve Jobs had the suite web applications even before the iPhone SDK. Windows is going to have an HTML5 layer. RIM is making WebWorks. WebOS was primarily a web-based operating system. Strangely, Android isn't really the HTML5 OS, even though Google's a huge HTML5 company. But what do you think about this move to HTML5? Do you think that this is trending in the future, or is there always going to be native apps and the web apps on these devices?
I think Apple's been a little hypocritical in terms of that. I mean, they're so application focused, so native application focused. And this iCloud.com on the web, it's 100%, in my opinion, an afterthought. Like you have these, Steve Jobs called them iCloud apps, like on the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod, and the Mac. And then, you get this web experience. And I think the reason for the web experience is, for PCs, but also, people traveling, people without their computers. But I think the focus is definitely on the native applications, and the native applications are what are integrated the best with the cloud software. So I really don't see Apple's push of HTML5. I see their push more so in the native apps.
As a developer, does developing just for HTML5 and letting it run everywhere appeal to you?
I think really everyone, not everyone, but I think Apple wants to push towards native apps and instead of being online on the web. And I think where Apple has moved, after a few years, everyone has moved to follow them. I mean, that's so obvious. So if Apple continues their track of moving towards native applications versus the web, I think everyone else is going to follow and they're going to lose the web component eventually. But,
All right, so sticking with it, Netflix used to have a horrible, horrendous, borderline choke-worthy iPad app that was very much a poorly executed web wrapper, and they've put out a new and updated app. They did it for Android first, but now it's come to iPad. I wanted to try it out, but Netflix was down for me for almost a day, but it did finally come back, and I was able to use it, and it's better. Have you guys tried the new Netflix app?
No, not yet.
no, I haven't tried it either, but I need to download it.
Yeah, it's Netflix is an interesting company for me because I made fun of them for doing that whole Quickster thing this year, and Reed Hastings has been doing a lot of really strange things, but I think it's a good step that they increased. I know they say that Apple TV is a much bigger target for them than the iPad, but we seem to be getting to a point where media is going to be ubiquitous across your screens. Whatever devices you have, you'll be able to watch your media there, and I think Netflix really needs to be in that space. We're laughing because Netflix has made us all laugh this year.
No, like some of the comments.
I'm not watching the comments. Damn it, I have to watch the comments. Grand Theft Auto 3, 10 years later, Seth, and Liberty City is as crime-ridden and chaotic as ever. Is there no hope for that place?
Yeah, it's down the toilet. I still remember when that game came out initially for PlayStation 2. I remember I was very, very ill, sick from work, and I was out for like a couple days, and it came out, and I dragged myself to the mall and bought it, and then the rest of the time I was sick, just sat and basically lost myself in that city. It was unbelievable. I can't believe it's been 10 years. That makes me feel just horribly, horribly old.
Yeah, been like a blink of an eye. Millennium Wheel, what, Seth? Is that Y2K? What was that again? Was there a Y2K issue? I don't remember. Did the world end?
Yeah.
No one told me. What kind of apps are you using on the iPad these days, Mark?
I have the Facebook app, Skype app.
Do you Skype on the iPad?
Sometimes. Like I like carrying it around instead of a laptop. I use Beehive, IM. What else do I use here? Well, I play some of the games. Like I got Grand Theft Auto. I play Modern Combat, Flight Control. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't really use applications as much on the iPad than I do on the iPhone. Like, I use my iPhone much more than the iPad.
I use all my Twitter and all that kind of quick stuff I have on the iPhone, but almost all my apps are now on the iPad. I don't know why, but the iPad is like my pick up and do stuff thing when I have time, and when I don't, it's highly communication focused on my iPhone.
Yeah, I agree. Communication more so on the iPhone than on the iPad. I don't really get a chance to use it that much. I'm sort of on the move a lot, but yeah.
All right, so I think that was the list of topics we had to discuss. So I am going to say thank you very much for joining us, Seth Clifford. Where can we find out more about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Seth Clifford. You can find me on iPhone Live on Wednesdays. You can find me on Iterate with Rene and Mark Edwards of Django. And if you want to check out some of the apps and sites and work that we do, please visit our website, nfidm.com. We're Nickelfish.
Damn it. And Mark, where can we find out more about you?
You can find my posts at 9to5mac.com and on Twitter at Marc Gurman.
And your apps? My name. Where do we find those apps?
You can find my apps at marcgurman.com. Have some great apps. Airhorn, Fart Dialer. Can you hear it? And yeah, that's me.
Mark is singularly responsible for half of Apple's app guidelines.
Yeah, of course.
You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at Tippy. We are here each and every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. You can you can email us at podcast@tippy.com or leave a comment when the show goes live on the blog. If you haven't already, please go to iTunes. Please subscribe. Please leave a rating. It helps people find the show. And for all of our shows, you can go to mobilenations.com/shows. That's iPhone Live, iPad Live, Zen and Tech, Iterate, Girls Gone Gadgets, Android Central, Crackberry, a plethora of entertainment for your viewing and listening pleasure. Marc, Seth, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Marc, it is always a pleasure. I think you keep the Apple guys up at night, and I thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And Seth, have a good evening.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Marc, for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, chat room, for keeping us smiling. You guys were on fire tonight. I think someone spiked their punch.
Chat room was funny.
I think someone spiked the chat room punch tonight.